My name is Rachel Monroe. I'm 54, and this morning I got fired. You'd think after 20 years building the spine of DeltaWave Technologies, they'd offer something better than a beige conference room and a lukewarm bottle of water. Laura Simmons, my manager for the last 2 years, sat across from me, spine too straight, eyes trying not to look smug. HR was there too, Tina something, nervously clicking her pen while pretending to care. Due to restructuring, we're dissolving your position, Laura said, eyes locked on the wall behind me. We're consolidating the data infrastructure team under product. I nodded slowly, letting them believe this was catching me off guard. But I'd known for weeks. That's the part they never expect. A woman like me, quiet, senior, never raises her voice. They assume I'm clueless. But I saw the signs. Meetings I used to lead happening without me. Strategy docs I was never looped into. And then that one beautiful accident, an email misdirected from Ethan Caldwell, DeltaWave CEO, in which he referred to me as an IP risk. An IP risk. My hands were steady as I took the manila folder Tina slid across the table. Severance, counseling, COBRA. Legalese shrink-wrapped in corporate regret. I understand, I said, my voice calm but firm. These decisions aren't easy. Relief flashed across their faces. They were prepared for tears, maybe an argument, a breakdown. I gave them none of it. Just like I'd given them none of my algorithm's latest version. You'll need to return your keycard, laptop, and phone by Friday, Tina mumbled. And, you'll be escorted after your final handover. I smiled, polite. Of course. But inside, something old and sharp twisted in my gut. Not grief, not even betrayal. Just a cold, crystalline awareness. They had no idea what was coming.
It started with a calendar invite that didn't belong to me. 3 weeks before the layoff, late Thursday night, I was still at the office, one of those glass boxes that look expensive but smell like printer toner and sadness. I'd been working on optimizing the compute cluster allocation rates, something no one else on the team really understood. Not fully. I was halfway through debugging when my inbox chimed. A meeting reminder. Title, Monroe Phase-Out Timeline. Internal only. It had come from Laura, meant for Ethan and legal, but I was CC'd. I froze. Just stared at the subject line, then double-clicked it open. The contents were brutal in their clarity. Bullet points outlining how to begin offboarding me without triggering legal exposure. Talking points for HR. A vague line about aligning attribution of my contributions to ensure the company held the IP. They hadn't just planned to cut me loose. They wanted to erase me. I clicked through the attachments with the kind of slow, deliberate calm I'd only felt once before when my husband left. There's a quiet that comes with betrayal, like your ears tune out everything but the sound of your own blood moving. One file was a slide deck labeled IP Restructure, Q2 Strategy. Page 4 had my name in lowercase, listed under Redundant Technical Resources. Page 7 discussed the algorithm, my algorithm, the one that powered DeltaWave's flagship product, FlowSync. Only they weren't calling it mine, they were calling it a native DeltaWave asset. That was the moment it clicked. The reason they'd never filed the patent. 2 years ago, I'd submitted full documentation for a provisional patent on the FlowSync distributed processing model. Legal told me they'd handle it, but I'd never seen confirmation, and when I followed up a few months later, they brushed it off, said the filing was pending. It wasn't pending. It had been shelved, deliberately. Because if there was no inventor on record, DeltaWave could claim it outright, especially if that inventor was no longer around to challenge the paperwork. I closed my laptop and sat there in the dark office, listening to the low hum of servers in the wall behind me. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, but something inside me sharpened like a snapped cable retracting fast. Over the next few nights, I started pulling together my own documentation, version histories, Git logs, whiteboard photos from my phone. I backed everything up to encrypted drives. The most crucial pieces, the refinements I'd made at home, the improvements DeltaWave didn't even know about, I gathered those separately. Every timestamp, every pull request, every annotated page from my notebook. I knew what I was building. Not a case for HR, a legal firewall. If they were going to try and take my work, they'd have to go through hell to get it. I told no one, not even Devin, my lead engineer, who would have followed me blind into a fire. I needed to be alone in this, clean, undeniable. Some nights I'd stare at my laptop at 3 a.m., eyes gritty, heart pounding, thinking, how did it come to this? 20 years of loyalty, mentoring every junior dev they threw at me, flying coach to conferences while Ethan gave keynote speeches from first class. And this was how they thanked me? They thought I'd just fade. The memo they accidentally sent, it didn't just wake me up, it gave me permission.
I'd always believed in paper trails, probably because of my dad. He used to say, measure twice, cut once, and if someone questions you, show your tape. That's how he ran his store, and that's how I built FlowSync. Everything, every line of code, every variable name, every change I made was tracked in a private version control system I kept mirrored at home. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Once I realized DeltaWave had never filed the patent, I started the clock. I contacted an IP attorney through an old MIT colleague, someone discreet, expensive, and fiercely aggressive. Her name was Marcia Weller. We met at a bakery in Cambridge, tucked into a booth like we were planning a heist. I'm not here to burn them, I told her, unwrapping a blueberry scone I didn't eat. I just want what's mine protected. Marcia leaned in, fingers steepled. You want ownership or revenge? Ownership, I said immediately. But maybe a little revenge wouldn't hurt. What followed were 2 intense weeks of documentation audits, sworn declarations, data exports, and stress that lived in my jaw. We pulled every record from my home server. Proof that I'd done the FlowSync refinements on my own time, on my own equipment, outside the scope of my DeltaWave employment agreement. Marcia handled the filing herself. Within days, we had confirmation the application was live. She even rushed the process through with provisional claims on the optimization layer I'd been refining in secret. It's clean, she told me after the last late-night review call. You're the sole inventor. They can't touch it. I stared at the screen, numb. For the first time in months, I felt safe. Not bulletproof, but armed. What I didn't expect was how lonely it felt. Not triumphant, just hollow. That weekend, I walked the Charles River Trail with my headphones in and nothing playing. The city shimmered in the early spring sun, and the students in their tech hoodies passed me like I didn't exist. I used to be them, young, hungry, worshiping code like it was scripture. But now I was a middle-aged woman carrying a $4,000 legal firewall in her purse and a secret bigger than any of them could guess. Still, I couldn't shake the guilt. I'd spent years building FlowSync with a team, 6 engineers who believed in the project, in me. Devin, who stayed late with me more nights than I could count. Mia, who sketched out the initial threading logic with me on a pizza box during a power outage. They didn't know the patent had never been filed. They didn't know DeltaWave planned to wipe me from the credits. And here I was, making a legal claim behind their backs. I could hear Devin's voice in my head. "You're not walking into this alone, right?" But I was. I had to, because if I looped them in too soon, I'd be putting them at risk. DeltaWave had surveillance tools, flagged keywords, VPN logs. It had to be airtight, silent. That Sunday night, as the city fell quiet and my apartment filled with the smell of jasmine tea and wood polish, I typed a note into my phone. Protect the work, protect the team. Don't blink. 3 days later, Marcia sent me the confirmation email. Patent filed, status pending, applicant, Rachel Monroe. And just like that, I was no longer an employee. I was an inventor.
The restaurant was tucked into the corner of a quiet Manhattan block, down past the noise and energy of Midtown. The Hudson Oak didn't even have a sign, just frosted glass, gold trim, and a doorman who nodded once and opened the door like he knew who I was. Michael Vega was already waiting in the private dining alcove, seated at a corner booth shielded by Japanese screens. He rose as I approached, gray at his temples, expensive watch gleaming under the soft light. "You look calm," he said, smiling. "I'd be pacing." "I've been pacing for weeks," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. "Tonight, I sit." Michael was the CEO of NovaGrid Systems, DeltaWave's fastest-growing competitor in the AI infrastructure race. We'd first met at a conference in Chicago years ago when he asked a single technical question that proved he'd actually read my white paper. Since then, we'd maintained a polite, distant rapport, occasional emails, mutual nods across stages. Nothing more. Until he reached out 2 weeks ago. "I assume they don't know you're here," he asked, signaling the waiter. "They don't know a lot of things, but they're about to." He handed me a folder, heavy stock, perfectly aligned tabs. Inside was the contract, exclusive licensing rights to my patent. Bonus signing, 7 figures. CTO role, equity stake, royalty residuals on all products that used my optimization layer. "This is generous," I said. "You created the foundation we're building our next 3 products on. We're not vultures. We're architects." That line stayed with me. Over dinner, truffle halibut, wilted greens, a wine I couldn't pronounce, we mapped out the next 3 weeks. Press release timing, internal strategy briefings, how and when to approach my team. He even had draft offer letters prepared for them already. "They've always respected you. If they're half as loyal as you say they are, they'll follow." I hesitated. It's not just about loyalty, it's about belief. They built FlowSync with me. They watched it take shape. They poured weekends into making it work. I don't want to pull them into something that's just revenge wearing better shoes. Michael set his wine glass down. "Then don't. Make it about vision. Make it about doing things differently, about giving them what DeltaWave never would." His words felt like a matchstick dragged across soaked fabric. No flame, not yet, but the promise of heat. After dessert, a caramel tart I barely touched, I signed. My hand didn't even tremble. Somewhere in Boston, DeltaWave was planning a Monday exec meeting to celebrate their streamlined org chart. They had no idea what was about to hit them. As we left, he held the door open for me. "Rachel," he said, his voice low,
When that press release hits Monday morning, Ethan Caldwell's gonna choke on his espresso. I didn't laugh, but I did smile. On the train back to Boston, I opened my phone and stared at the offer letters. One for Devin, one for Mia, 4 more for the rest of the team. Saved in drafts. Waiting. I whispered to myself, one more day. Friday, I'd say goodbye to DeltaWave. Monday, I'd start something real.
Friday morning, I wore the same navy blazer I'd worn on my first day at DeltaWave 17 years ago. The sleeves were a little tighter now, the color faded at the cuffs, but I liked the symmetry. A beginning and an end, stitched together by habit and thread. The office buzzed with the usual noise. Coffee machines sputtering, keyboards clacking, conversations half-whispered over cubicle walls. A few people gave me that look. Sympathy, discomfort, the awkward grimace reserved for funerals and layoffs. No one said much, except Devin, who passed by my door with a look I couldn't read. "You good?" he asked, casual, like we weren't standing at the edge of a cliff. "I'm fine," I said. "I left notes for everything." "Of course you did," he smirked. "You always do." In the end, that's what I gave them. Meticulous, excruciatingly detailed handover notes. Process docs, architecture maps, code comments so clean they practically sang. Every server configuration, every deployment pipeline, every performance anomaly I'd solved over the years. I left it all. Not out of kindness, out of control. I wanted a perfect record. I wanted the evidence to be irrefutable. If DeltaWave came after me later, and they would, they'd find I'd done everything by the book. No secrets, no theft, no breach of contract. Tina from HR met me at 3:30 p.m. for my exit checklist. She read from a sheet like it was a spell, eyes glazed over. "You acknowledge that any intellectual property developed during your employment remains property of DeltaWave." I looked her straight in the eye. "Anything developed on DeltaWave time with DeltaWave tools under DeltaWave contracts, yes." She nodded, barely hearing me. "You confirm you have returned all proprietary data and materials. I have taken nothing that belongs to DeltaWave." The final item was the NDA, a thick packet of legalese designed to silence and scare. I skimmed it. I signed. The patent was mine. The new improvements were mine. I wasn't afraid. Walking back to my office felt like slow motion. I boxed up my things, family photos, a small cactus, a mug that read, "System Architect, not Psychic." The last item I wrapped in tissue was a tiny acrylic trophy from 6 years ago. It had my name and Innovation Award etched in cheap silver font. The irony was bitter in my mouth. Then came the knock. Laura Simmons leaned against the doorframe, arms folded, trying too hard to look casual. She said, "I just wanted to check that everything's clear for your departure." Crystal clear. She watched me tape the box closed, eyes flicking across the room like she expected me to torch it. These restructuring decisions, they're never personal. "Of course not," I replied, meeting her gaze. "Business is business." Something in my voice made her flinch, just for a second. "Will you be taking time off?" "Actually, I'm starting something new on Monday." Her smile faltered. "That's fast. Anything interesting?" I shrugged. "Leadership role. I'm excited." She nodded, but her eyes had already gone blank, already planning the next offboarding. I could have said anything, told her I'd joined a space program or bought a lighthouse, and she'd have nodded the same way. When I stepped through the turnstiles one last time, I didn't look back. But I did glance at the sky. Cloudless, calm, the kind of silence you get right before the thunder. The press release went live at exactly 7:01 a.m. NovaGrid's PR team didn't just send out a memo, they launched a missile. The subject line was bold. NovaGrid acquires exclusive rights to Monroe processing architecture, appoints inventor as CTO. They didn't call it FlowSync. That was DeltaWave's branding. They used its technical name, the Monroe processing architecture. My name, in the headline, attached to every syndication, every post, every email pinging into industry inboxes across the country. I watched it all unfold from the corner office of NovaGrid's New York HQ, coffee in hand, suit crisp, shoes I couldn't afford 6 months ago, clicking quietly against polished stone floors. Michael greeted me like I'd worked there forever. The team had arranged fresh flowers and a handwritten note on my desk. By 7:12 a.m., LinkedIn was on fire. Comments, shares, a few stunned emojis. By 8 a.m., the speculation had started. I saw one post from an analyst: DeltaWave loses core architects to NovaGrid. Unfiled IP? Someone's about to get litigated. It didn't take long to reach DeltaWave. Devin's first text arrived at 8:24. "What the hell did you do?" Caldwell's pacing like a caged wolf. Legal just walked into the exec wing. I smiled, finished my coffee, and sent him a short reply. "Check your personal email." He did. So did Mia, and Kara, and the rest of the team. All 6 of them had offer letters waiting, signed by Michael, matched with raises, titles, and relocation bonuses. I'd held off until the last possible second. I hadn't wanted to drag anyone into a war they weren't ready for, but now it was their move. At 9:15 a.m., DeltaWave's stock dipped 3.7%. Not a crash, just a shiver. But Wall Street reads shivers like earthquakes. Miguel from finance messaged me. Anonymous tip. They've pulled all the R&D servers, locked everything, emergency board meeting called for 10. At 9:30, Ethan Caldwell emailed me. Subject line, "We need to talk." The body of the message was 3 lines. "Rachel, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Can we speak? Please call me at your earliest convenience." I forwarded it to NovaGrid's legal team without replying. Let Marcia handle it. That was the deal. Still, my heart thumped as I stared at his name, not from fear, but from fury. This man had taken credit for my work. He let his team plot my exit, slice me out of the company like I was a line item to delete. Now he wanted to talk? Now that the world knew who built FlowSync? The buzz didn't stop. NovaGrid's communications team monitored media hits like hawks. 3 tech journals requested interviews. An investment newsletter called it the stealthiest tech coup of the year. Michael stopped by my office around 11. "Legal's loving this," he said, handing me a fresh printout. The number of companies using FlowSync-based systems? More than we thought. Licensing requests are already coming in. I didn't respond. I just ran my finger across the printout, landing on one name: DeltaWave Technologies. He followed my gaze. "They'll call. Might not be today, but they'll have to." I nodded. Let them sweat. Outside, traffic moved in slow waves. Inside, my phone buzzed again. Devin. Update: Legal is yelling. Ethan slammed a chair. Mia is packing. I think this is the best Monday I've ever had. And for the first time in years, I laughed. Not out of malice, but out of freedom. By noon, the dam had cracked. Devin called me, not texted, called. And when I picked up, his voice was electric. "We're in," he said, "all 6 of us." "You've all talked?" "We didn't need to," he replied. "We've been watching it happen for years." "You held that team together, Rachel. The second you were gone, the cracks showed up like rust on wet metal." I didn't speak right away. I just stared out the window of my new office, the Hudson stretching out beneath the skyline, and let his words settle in my chest. "I don't want to steal anyone," I finally said. "You didn't," Devin answered. "You built something.
DeltaWave let it rot. We're choosing to follow what we actually believe in. By 1 p.m., they had all signed. Mia, Devin, Kara, Tim, Sean, Juno. NovaGrid HR processed them faster than I could breathe. Some would work remote for a while, some were ready to relocate. But we would be together again, this time with real ownership, real equity, and no more looking over our shoulders for execs waiting to claim credit. DeltaWave must have realized it too. At 2:15 p.m., they called an all-hands meeting. Miguel, ever my inside whisperer, live texted the whole thing like he was narrating a hostage negotiation. Caldwell looks pale, Marjorie from legal keeps blinking like she's about to faint. Someone asked directly if we ever filed the FlowSync patent. Ethan prepped the Q&A. The anxiety on that floor must have been thick enough to choke on. Most of my old coworkers had never even heard the full story behind FlowSync, only that it came out of our research division. That was how Ethan had sold it. Corporate innovation, birthed by a team. No name, no face, definitely no Rachel Monroe. Now the truth was public. The headlines didn't mince words. Inventor of DeltaWave's core tech defects to rival, patent filed under personal name. NovaGrid surges after Monroe appointment. DeltaWave silent on IP lapse. I didn't need revenge, but I did want them to sit in the discomfort, to face the echo of their own decisions. My new assistant, Jordan, knocked softly on the door with a folder. 5 of the 6 will start Monday. Tim needs to finish a consulting contract first. I nodded. Perfect. He paused. Also, legal says DeltaWave's lawyers called twice. I smiled slightly. Let them leave a message. The thing about loyalty is that you can't buy it. Not with money, not with job titles. You earn it in the quiet hours, in the bug fixes at midnight, in the moments when someone's code breaks and you kneel beside them, not above them. DeltaWave forgot that. NovaGrid didn't. Before the end of the day, Devin sent me a picture. The 6 of them lined up in front of the old FlowSync whiteboard, marker pens in hand, scrawling one word across it in thick red letters. Exodus. No one looked sad. They looked free. I saved the photo. Maybe one day I'll frame it. For now, it was enough to know that loyalty, real loyalty, isn't about staying. It's about knowing who to follow when it counts.
Ethan called 5 times. The first time, I saw his name flash across my phone at 3:07 p.m. I stared at it for a long moment, then hit decline. It felt surgical. The second time, I let it ring until it stopped. By the 4th, he left a voicemail, his voice tight, too cheery, the kind of tone a man uses when pretending he isn't spiraling. Rachel, hey, it's Ethan. I'm hoping we can talk, just to clear some things up. No hard feelings. Please give me a call when you get a chance. I didn't owe him clarity or closure. Instead, I walked into the NovaGrid boardroom for the 4 p.m. strategy session. The conference table was massive, live edge walnut, the kind that humbles your posture. Michael was already there, along with 3 board members and our head of product. No one introduced me like a newcomer. They introduced me like a weapon. Rachel, Michael said, nodding, we're ready for your roadmap. I plugged in my laptop, hands steady. On the screen, the first slide. Phase 1, the Monroe architecture, optimization at scale. I didn't rush. I explained the backbone of the design, how the threading logic reduced CPU contention by 43%, how the streamlining model could shave off real-world processing time by full seconds in high-frequency environments. I didn't dumb it down. I didn't check for nods of approval. I just told the truth. And
they listened. Not one person interrupted to mansplain. No one hijacked my presentation halfway through. There were questions, of course, but the kind that signaled respect, not challenge. I wasn't defending myself here. I was building something. And I realized this was what I'd been waiting for. Not the title, not the paycheck, but the space to speak without shrinking. After the session, Michael caught up with me in the hallway. "You're exactly what we needed," he said. "You didn't even know what I could do." I had a pretty good idea. Ethan's been trying to hire our engineers for months. They all said the same thing. She's the brain behind the curtain. I didn't respond right away. There was a lump in my throat I wasn't expecting. Later that evening, I sat in my new office as the sky over Manhattan shifted into velvet. I looked at the whiteboard, still clean, waiting. My phone buzzed again. Voicemail transcription. "Rachel, it's Ethan. Again, we're hoping you might be open to a conversation about licensing. There's some concern on our end about overlap with, well, anyway, please reach out." I hit forward, sent it straight to Marcia with 2 words. "You take it." That was the shift, really, when I realized silence could be louder than confrontation. DeltaWave was unraveling, and I didn't need to yell. I just needed to wait. And while they panicked, I kept moving forward. Every pause I took was intentional, and every second I stayed quiet, that was another second they had to sit with what they'd done.
By Wednesday, the bleeding was obvious. DeltaWave's stock had dropped 11% since Monday. Industry analysts were circling like vultures with fountain pens, writing think pieces titled things like "The IP Crisis That Could Sink DeltaWave" and how one patent broke a product line. It felt unreal watching it all from the 37th floor of NovaGrid's headquarters, the skyline wrapped in soft clouds like cotton pulled too thin. My inbox was now a constant stream of licensing inquiries, some cautious, others desperate. Companies that had integrated FlowSync into their systems were suddenly aware that they might be running proprietary architecture illegally. They weren't worried about me suing them, they were worried about being collateral damage in the war. And DeltaWave, they were sinking fast. I was sipping peppermint tea when Marcia called. "They finally reached out," she said. No preamble. "DeltaWave's attorneys want to begin negotiations." I replied, "Terms haven't changed." They know that. But they're stalling, trying to buy time. Classic last ditch. She sent over the memo their lawyers had submitted. It was defensive, vague, and carefully avoided the word acknowledgement. They wanted access to my algorithm, yes. They even offered a licensing fee, half the industry standard. But they still wouldn't say my name in writing. "They'll never sign the attribution clause," she warned. "Then they'll never get the tech." I wasn't being stubborn. I was being precise. I didn't care about punishing them financially. I cared about that line. Developed by Dr. Rachel Monroe. Simple. Factual, the truth, and apparently unbearable. At 2 p.m. that same day, NovaGrid's DevOps team notified me that 2 Fortune 100 clients had officially started migration consultations, leaving DeltaWave behind. One of them cited concerns about platform integrity. The other just wrote, "We trust the architect." That one hit me. After all those years of hiding in the background while Ethan smiled for cameras, finally, someone said it. Around 3:30, Devin pinged me. "Board meeting at DeltaWave just ended. Caldwell's out. Official. Interim CEO is Richard Donovan, their old COO. Apparently, he's actually sane." I blinked at the screen. Just like that, Ethan was gone. 15 years of playing the visionary, gone in a single boardroom vote. Later, I'd find out his exit package was slashed. Board cited gross mismanagement of core IP. Laura Simmons was let go too, Marjorie from legal, the entire chain that tried to ghost me out of history. I expected to feel vindicated. I thought I'd be giddy. But mostly I just felt tired. I closed my laptop and sat with the quiet for a minute. All this noise, this chaos, was the aftermath of a decision I made sitting alone in my apartment 3 weeks ago. Me, a cup of tea, and the weight of a memory stick full of code. Sometimes all it takes is one person choosing not to disappear. Later that night, an email from Richard Donovan landed in my inbox. Dr. Monroe, congratulations on your appointment at NovaGrid. I've been brought in to stabilize DeltaWave. I'd like to discuss licensing your technology in good faith with attribution and a formal apology for past handling. Are you available for a meeting next week? I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I forwarded it to Michael, then to Marcia. Then I sat back in my chair, watching the lights of the city flicker like pixels across a black screen. They say the truth always wins in the end, but I don't think it wins. I think it waits. And when the liars get loud enough to burn themselves, that's when it steps into
The conference ballroom was lit like a sunrise, warm gold flooding the walls, a stage wide enough to swallow me whole. But I wasn't nervous. Not anymore. 1 year to the day after DeltaWave told me to clean out my desk, I stood behind a podium at the National Innovation Forum in Washington, D.C., waiting for the applause to fade. The same conference Ethan used to keynote. The same one where I once stood silently in the back row, watching him take credit for my work. Now, it was my name on the banners, my photo in the program. Please welcome Dr. Rachel Monroe, Chief Technology Officer of NovaGrid Systems and the inventor of the Monroe architecture used in over 70% of enterprise-grade processing platforms today. I stepped up to the mic, took a breath, and told the truth. I was never supposed to be here. Not because I didn't do the work, but because for most of my career, I let other people speak louder than I did. I saw heads nod, young engineers, mostly women, sitting up straighter. I spent 2 decades inside a company that used my ideas and never once said my name in public. When they decided I was no longer useful, they tried to delete me entirely. But here's the thing. Innovation has fingerprints, and I kept receipts. Laughter, sharp and unexpected. I spoke about FlowSync, though I didn't call it that. I talked about the architecture, the threading model, the latency cuts, the nights spent debugging under the soft blue haze of a desk lamp. I spoke of systems, but more than that, I spoke of value. Ownership doesn't start with a contract. It starts when you recognize that your work matters, that it deserves to be named, traced, cited, protected. People clapped. I didn't expect them to, mid-speech, but they did. Afterward, at the reception, I was mobbed. Not by execs or VCs, but by builders, junior devs, first-year engineers, women who whispered that my story made them start documenting their work better, that they'd filed their first provisional patents, that they'd walked away from roles that asked them to dim their light. A girl no older than 25 looked up at me, eyes wide. Do you think someone like me could ever build something like you did? I leaned closer. You already are, I told her. Just don't let anyone rename it when they do. That evening, I was back in my office at NovaGrid when the final email came in. Richard Donovan again, official confirmation of the licensing agreement. Signed, sealed. Included was a public statement DeltaWave would post the following day. We acknowledge Dr. Rachel Monroe as the original creator of the Monroe processing architecture, and we are grateful for the opportunity to now license this foundational technology with proper recognition. I read it twice, not because I doubted it, but because some things still feel unreal after they're true. Michael walked in 10 minutes later with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. He said, "The board wanted me to tell you, NovaGrid just surpassed DeltaWave in market valuation.
First time in company history. I didn't cheer. I didn't toast. I just smiled. Slow and real. That's what happens, I said, when you stop erasing the people who build your future. And we clinked glasses under the fading city light. Have you ever been written out of your own story? I was. Fired at 54. Stripped of credit for the work that built an empire. But I didn't vanish. I documented, protected, waited. And when the time came, I reclaimed my voice. This isn't a tale of revenge. It's about recognition. About what happens when one person refuses to be erased and what that ripple looks like when truth hits the surface. If you've ever felt invisible at work, at home, in life, I want to hear your story. Drop it in the comments below. Someone else may need to hear it too. If this journey resonated with you, like the video, subscribe, or share it with someone who needs that reminder. Your work matters. You matter. Don't let them forget it. To visibility, to value, to naming what was always yours.